to help support and better represent BIPOC and other underrepresented groups on a national and local scale. The Canadian Colors Kingston Foundation acknowledges that we are on traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and thank these nations for their care and stewardship over this shared land. Now, we welcome Grandmother Kathy Brandt of the Mohawk Six Nations Confederacy to say a prayer.
Okay, sego seo goigos gonna go aga. Kathy Brandt, Yungyuks, walks Garewa Gake and Yungi Haga Gandagi. So I'm Grandmother Kathy Brandt from Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory, and I sit with the Bear Clan. And I bring to you the words before all else, or the Thanksgiving address. And so I ask that you please be mindful in this moment so that we may all be of one mind and begin the business of the day. And so these words are important because they remind us as we give thanks to the people first, because we are the most vulnerable. Creation can get along just fine without us, but we would cease to exist without creation. And therefore, we stand humble before it. And it's our main responsibility to the natural world and to Creator for its integral part in how we as humans support that web of creation. I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. And today, we give greetings and thanks for the people, because we have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. And we are grateful that there is still so much love in the world. And now our minds are one. We gather our minds together and offer greetings and thanks to all the things upon the earth, all the green and growing things, all the medicines, foods, plants, trees, shrubs, and grasses. Also the waters and the life within the waters, and our relatives, the animals. And now our minds are one. We gather our minds together and offer our greetings and thanks to all the things in the sky, the birds who sing their beautiful songs, the winds that come from the four directions, our elder brother, the sun, our grandmother, the moon, and our grandfathers, the thunderers, and the stars in the heavens. And now our minds are one. We gather our minds together and offer our most choice greetings to and thanks to Singoya Disa, creator of all things. And now our minds are one. And this is where I ask that if there's anything that I have forgotten, I ask that you give such greetings and thanks in your own way. And now our minds are one. And so to end this, I ask that you please keep in mind the souls of the children that are being found around the residential schools and their families. And also for the Muslim people who were brutally attacked in London, Ontario, that they will not walk in fear any longer. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Grandmother Kathy. Thank you and welcome to our guests and federal candidates for the Kingston and Islands for joining us today to address some questions and issues from the multinational and cross-representational leaders from our community. We would also like to thank Your TV, the Canadian Colors Board of Directors, and the team at BVK Solutions for bringing this event to fruition. And of course, thank you to CCKF's founder and president, Mr. Jimmy Hassan, who I have the privilege of introducing now to say a few words about the organization.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you again for everyone who helped. Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you again for everyone who helped this event come to life. Canadian Colors of Kingston Foundation was created to bring different cultures, mindsets, and backgrounds together to foster understanding and communication and embrace change to create a diverse and inclusive community. We believe this responsibility also lies with educating and understanding not only our community members, but also our politicians about the issue being faced in our community. This event will provide an opportunity for candidates to discuss how their platform will support BIPOC and underrepresented communities over the next 4 years and get a chance to hear from some of the underrepresented group in Kingston. Thank you, everyone who is joining us today via Zoom or television, and we hope that today's panel will help you to make your choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimmy. As previously mentioned, today's panel is not a debate, but rather a platform for our local candidates to hear and speak on the issues specific to our communities. Canadian Colors has collected questions from our representatives across the communities and will address them as follows. Canadian Colors will ask 4 moderated questions to be delivered by our special guests, who I will introduce in a moment. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to address each of these questions. Next, candidates will hear questions from local community groups and will be asked to deliver questions on behalf of their organizations. Each candidate will have 1 minute each to answer these questions. Time permitting, we may also have the opportunity to open the floor to audience questions. If you would like to ask a question, please send your question through the event Zoom chat. We do ask that if you would like to be broadcast on screen, that you are connected to high-speed internet. If not, one of our hosts can ask the question to the panelists. Thank you to our special guests, Mr. Mohammed Sani, Program Coordinator at Kingston Immigration Partnership, and Grandmother Kathy Brandt of the Mohawk Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy, Indigenous Community Development Worker with the Kingston Community Health Center, and Grandmother and Knowledge Keeper for Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board, Limestone District School Board, and the City of Kingston's Grand Theater. Without further ado, we are excited to welcome our local candidates for the 2021 federal election. Mr. Mark Gerritsen, representing the Liberal Party of Canada, Mr. Gary Oosterhoff, representing the Conservative Party of Canada, Mr. Vic Sahai, representing the New Democratic Party of Canada, Dr. Waji Khan, representing the Green Party of Canada, and Ms. Shelley Sale-Udall, representing the People's Party of Canada. For our first moderated question, we will start on this side of the studio and work our way across with the second person starting the next question. With that, let's begin.
According to media reports, hate crimes and incidents motivated by prejudice, discrimination, and racism appear to be on the rise in Canada, including here in Kingston. If elected, what would you do to stem the tide of such crimes and combat racism?
All right, and Vic, this question is for you, please.
Sorry, what question was that in terms of the order? Because it's not in the right order.
Hate
Yeah.
incidents and crimes motivated by prejudice, discrimination, and racism appear to be on the
Thank
rise
you.
in Canada,
Okay,
including here in Kingston.
sorry, my apologies. So the number of hate crimes in 2016 was 1,409. In 2020, it went up to 669. And you can only guess why. Because of the pandemic, the Chinese were blamed for that. And guess what? They faced the consequences of hate crimes. So we have to really look at hate crimes and prosecute hate crimes under the Criminal Act. Now, the people who experience hate crimes often don't report these hate crimes to law enforcement because they see law enforcement as being biased and therefore they can't trust them. We need to work on restoring that trust. As the NDP, for example, we will have Indigenous police Indigenous communities. One of the other things I want to do is to ensure that the LGBTQ+ community are identified as hate crimes perpetrated on that community. I want them to be identified as hate crimes and prosecuted as such. There is one thing that I want to say in terms of intersectionality. And basically what intersectionality is when you have a woman.
20 seconds.
So for example, when you have a woman who is discriminated against, who's a minority, the discrimination isn't additive, it is multiplicative. And what I want to do is to fight for women's right to be safe. And when that right is violated, the right to be heard as a victim of sexual assault
Thank you.
and sexual harassment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, and Mark, to you, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the Canadian Colors Kingston Foundation, Jimmy Hassan, and everybody who put on, worked really hard to get this event together. I'd start by saying that I was a very big supporter of Motion 103, which was brought to the floor of the House of Commons by a fellow Liberal colleague of mine, Ikra Khalid. This was a motion that was specifically designed to recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of Islamophobia and the fears that have been generated throughout not just Canada, but indeed the world. I was very discouraged when 91 Conservative members of Parliament not only voted against that motion, but used it as an opportunity to continue to suggest that it would lead to a decrease in freedoms of speech. Canada is a country that, unless you are of Indigenous descent, we have all come here over the last 250 to 300 years. We are a country of immigration. We are a country of celebrating our differences, of recognizing that just getting into a melting pot isn't good. We need to actually celebrate our differences, to come to Canada, to be here, and to not just become part of the community, but to celebrate the differences that we have. I literally would not be standing here right now had it not been for the open arms that Canada had for the rest of the world following World War II. My mother comes from Italy. My father comes from Holland. They both immigrated here in the 50s. And because of the warm, embracing attitude of Canada, they were able to immigrate and start families here. I, if re-elected, would continue to push the government to encourage policies like M103, to develop strategies around fighting Islamophobia and fears that are based on misguided information that are spread throughout the internet. That is a top priority for the Liberal Party, and indeed I see it as one of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Shelley?
Hi, thank you for including me today. I also appreciate the accommodations that were made for all of us to be able to join together. In regards to hate incidents and crimes being motivated by prejudice, discrimination, and racism, I definitely have that experience now. From an actual individual level, I have a little bit of an idea as to what other people have gone through, seeing how I have some hate speech that has been directed towards me, where I've had to get the police involved, all because I stand for a political party, which I think is absolutely, I can't believe that this is actually happening in our Canada, but I've experienced it, and it's not okay for sure. The fact that this is actually happening in Canada, I honestly believe it speaks to the leadership. When we have a leadership that includes and involves everyone instead of dividing and separating us and isolating us, I think it's really important that we lead by example. I know that there's lots of people that don't feel hate and discrimination, or, based on socioeconomic status. I mean, we can add into the list that's been growing about being diverse. We can add political affiliation in there, but we need to move from competition to collaboration. I know we were chatting about that earlier, about getting together, that we're all in this together. So how can we work together? But I think it comes from top down. I know there's lots of policies and trainings and different things like that, but those are systemic things, which are kind of like a top-down approach to dealing with something. And I'm personally about bottom up, and it's all about who I include and focusing on people's strengths. And instead of getting caught in this rabbit hole of having to have the same thought and belief, we need to recognize and honor and value that we each have different and diverse opinions and beliefs, and we need to honor that.
Thank you, Shelley. And Waji?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Waji Khan. I'm a dentist in Kingston. I'm also a father to 2 young Muslim children. The reason I decided to run for office was because my kids, I wanted to ensure that the Canada I leave my children is going to be better than the Canada I had, and that they have an opportunity to have all the opportunities and experiences that I did. They do say that we do not inherit this earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. I want to ensure that we work hard so that when I give this world back to my children and the future generations, it's in a better state than what we inherited from. So answering your first question, hate is something which grows out of fear. And one of the things that I admired about Justin Trudeau when he first came in and his promises was not just the elimination of the first past the post election system and electoral reform, but the promises of positive politics and that the days of politics of fear and division would be behind us. Well, we all learned that that wasn't the case. But we need to tackle the fear element in order to truly battle the behaviors which contribute towards prejudice, discrimination, and racism. Fear has no place in politics, and the same applies to multiculturalism. We can't fear our differences. Canada is a country which was grown through the immigration process and immigrants. Growing up with multiculturalism, we eventually moved towards race relations and understanding of one another. Through the proper development of meaning and understanding, we can foster more solidarity amongst Canadians to move towards a tolerant society where collective action leads towards collaboration. To support such initiatives, the government needs to continue to invest in programs that allow us not only to celebrate our unique global differences, but allow us to showcase and involve others in this process as well. As such, events like multicultural festivals where we showcase the music, dance, food, and language of the hundreds of subcultures which not only form Canada, but form Kingston should be encouraged. I think this is a path towards the realization that we actually have more in common than we have differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. And Gary, if you'd like to answer a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just introduce myself again. I'm Gary Ostraff. I'm the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, and it is a pleasure to be here today. And I thank Jimmy and the Canadian Colours Foundation for having me here. It is in having these conversations that we learn more about each other and share in the things of life that bring us together. Perhaps the one thing missing is a potluck meal and sharing our favorite foods, because that's what we've done together and really brings unity and hope and renewal. But I know that is for another day. I look forward to that as well. When one walks the halls of Hotel Hindu Hospital, it is often seen on the wall as you enter a very large wall hanging with a verse or statement that says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." That statement is repeated over and over in many different languages and cultures. And I've often thought of it. Most of all cultures and faiths have some wisdom of similar meaning to share and practice. For me today, that is the spirit for which I stand here amongst you and offer my life experiences, my knowledge and caring as we look into each other's lives and seek understanding and help along the way. I am not here as someone who claims to have all the answers, as we've just shared. I really wish sometimes it could be a different format, but you get to hear from us. But really, it's a collection of ideas and sharing. And what's most important is that we listen together. Here in this studio, you will find out that we are listening. It is in community and communication resulting in positive action and outcomes that can be achieved. And so it is my deep commitment to represent all members of our community and recognizing that we all have an inherent dignity and deserve to be respected. And that's why I'm here. Canada's Conservatives condemn hate speech and speech that incites violence on social media. When we called free speech and freedom of expression and a free press are basic tenets of Canadian law and Canadian democracy. Canada already has existing criminal law protections against publishing hate speech, incitement to violence, and sexually abusive material. Canada's Conservatives will follow the consultation process and review the eventual legislation with interest to ensure that free speech rights of Canadians are protected. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we will move on to our second question.
This election comes against the backdrop of the revelations about the thousands of Indigenous children on the grounds of former residential schools. What specific action would your party take towards reconciliation?
All right, and this time we'll have Mark begin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. There is no doubt that in order to get to a point of a true reconciliation, it's not only going to be something that it will not be something that's completed in my lifetime, indeed my children's lifetime, or probably even their children's lifetime. The reality of the situation is that this is an issue, a problem that has developed, a systemic problem that has developed over many generations based on the systems that we have had in place that have unfortunately been extremely discriminatory towards Indigenous people. I will say that I had the opportunity to participate in 3 very meaningful pieces of legislation that were calls from the Truth and Reconciliation Report during my time in Parliament. The first was on the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which unfortunately most Conservative members voted against once again. But it was a very meaningful piece of legislation that gave specific rights to Indigenous peoples. The second thing that we did was we committed and built, either built new or refurbished 200 schools, primarily many of them located in the prairies, that were for Indigenous peoples, that were run by Indigenous peoples, and that were developed and constructed with Indigenous peoples' input so that they could take them over and run these schools. And then the last one I would mention, which was a very important piece of legislation for me, was the Indigenous Languages Act. This was Bill C-91, and this specifically enshrined in Canadian legislation the Indigenous languages that were out there and how we were going to support those so that they didn't fall off. In many cases, it was getting to the point where those languages were going to become extinct. So we had to develop a strategy as to how we were going to continue to promote and preserve those languages. And I would say that in our platform, what we've committed to doing is specifically on the Truth and Reconciliation Report is to provide funding towards the construction of a permanent home for the National Center of Truth and Reconciliation so that we can continue to have dialogue, develop strategies, and move forward down the path of reconciliation.
Thank you, Mark. And question now for Shelley.
Thank you. So the question is asking about what I would do to support reconciliation. Working with Indigenous populations is not new to me. My actual university research paper was on Aboriginal youth way back when. I'm working with children and Indigenous communities, having worked up in Charlotte Lake as well. I've learned a lot from the families that I've worked with. And again, you know, I can't begin to know what that would look like, but also having worked with a community where we created community groups. I can't remember the name of it, about 4 years ago, where we brought people together celebrating the medicine wheel, and we had all sorts of activities and community engagement. Everybody was welcome to join. So creating sort of awareness events and things like that, I know I've been part of as well. But I've learned from the Indigenous community lots of information about who they are and what they want to see. I know right now, the party leader of the People's Party of Canada was meeting with Chief Calvin Bernot of the First Nations, and he was presented with the Freedom ceremonial blanket. So I know that the conversation for reconciliation is already starting with Maxime Bernier. I know that collaborating and engaging with our community is really important. That's one of the things I've been very good at, and I already have some of the background with those people and smudging and different things that we can do. But again, they need to have a voice. All our communities need to have a voice.
Well, thank you very much, Shelley. Dr. Khan?
Thank you, ma'am. As I'd stated in the previous debate, when we're looking for truth and reconciliation with the Indigenous, what we need is the real truth for real reconciliation. And the real hard truth is that the government had a system where we allowed pedophiles to rape children in an institution which was run by government. And this is wrong. Our government has had 6 years to find ways to provide answers. And when I say answers, I mean real answers about what the real truth is and not some sort of half-assed excuse. Yet the government is appealing a 2019 Human Rights Tribunal, which ordered that $40,000 be paid out to each child taken from their home and put into the residential school system. Over 3,000 children died in the residential school system, and over 150,000 attended. Mr. Trudeau comments further to say, should someone who went to a day school for a few months or a year be compensated to the exact same amount as someone who was in a traumatic situation over many, many years, where they were taken from their families and had a very, very different experience? Right now, the Human Rights Tribunal says that everyone should get the same amount. We don't think that that's entirely fair. And my question was, how many times does a child have to be raped in order to make them relevant? And there was no answer provided. The Liberal representative in the previous debate stated that 68% of boil water advisories were reduced for providing fresh water to our Inuit communities. And this is hailed as being a success. 68%, or 2/3. I'm going to ask my friend, if I was to offer you some water, which bottle of water would you want? We call it truth and reconciliation, Yet we still call the act that governs the Indigenous, the Indian Act, which is racist in its title. And I can't understand why a sincere effort cannot be made to change an act which Mr. Pierre Elliott Trudeau represented as Indian Affairs Minister back in Pearson's government. The Sun cannot make an effort to change. So if we want truth and reconciliation, we have to be honest about one thing. Are we really looking for the real truth? And what reconciliation are we looking for with the Indigenous? Thank you.
Thank you. And Gary, question to you.
Thank you very much. Canada's Conservatives and acknowledge the deep sorrow and the mourning that all Indigenous people and survivors of residential schools are experiencing. We all our hearts here, grieve for the Indigenous communities who are sharing in this trauma. These discoveries are a somber reminder of the devastating and harmful effects that residential schools had and still have on many survivors today, and they need to be addressed. Conservatives have called for a swift timeline and funding to deliver on the Truth and Reconciliation calls for action 71 to 76 involving missing children and providing healing for families. That's on the conservative level. For me personally, I have grown so much in my understanding of Indigenous issues, and my time on council has been one of transformation for me. The pleasure or the experience of the smudgings that have been hosted at City Hall have changed my heart and really drawn me closer to that circle. Recently, when the bridge was launched, I was at early in the morning as the sun was rising, had the opportunity to be at a smudging to bless the start of the third crossing. And I will never forget when the swans flew over us as that happened. And for me, that was a beautiful sign for things. And that experience to me is what it's all about. And I've written down so many things that come to my mind. But I'm very thankful for the circles that we've had at council for training and for understanding, and it has drawn me in. And I think that there's so little to fear. We are here. There's nothing to fear. We are in this together. And I am looking forward to, as the MP for Kingston and the Islands, to continue that engagement and to learning and growing together and bringing positive change to our community and to our great nation together.
Thank you, Gary. And with that, we will move over to Vic.
For generations, the government has tried to extinguish Indigenous people and their culture. We need action, and we need to do it now in consultation with the Indigenous people. We cannot do it in isolation of. The Liberal government has failed to redress these injustices. Instead, what do? They sue the St. Anne's School survivors. The NDP will have policies that are genuinely have a genuine nation-to-nation approach. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to have safe drinking water and housing for all. The NDP is the only party that has an Indigenous housing strategy within 100 days of being elected. Compensation for all residential schools, and for God's sakes, stop the lawsuits. Settle Indigenous land claims through nation-to-nation dialogues and not through the courts. Move to enact all calls of action that is outlined in the Reconciliation Commission and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report. Not just the easy ones and not just the symbolic ones. Ensure self-determination and self-government for Indigenous people. In terms of me, I came through to Canada from colonial Guyana, and I've worked in the North. I've lived in the North. I have seen the violence and the inequities stemming from colonialism and the residential schools in particular. I am in a unique position to have a perspective on both racism and colonialism. Thank you.
Right. We would just like to remind all the candidates before we move into the next question to stay on topic for your question. We're not having a discussion necessarily between candidates, but looking more strictly for your answers on these. But with that, we will move on to our third moderated question.
Why should the BIPOC members of our community choose you over the rest of the candidates? How would you protect their specific needs and interests as an elected member of parliament?
Right. So for this question, we'll be starting with Shelley.
Thank you for that question. As an elected member of parliament, I think that hits pretty close to home for me. My number one talent assessment is an includer. I'm a strong advocate for children and populations that are vulnerable, including marginalized. I too, having experienced some of that, know a little bit about it. I know my past experiences, there are lots of things that we've done to help people feel included, that they belong and that they're valued. I think our current culture in Canada right now is a problem, that we are not allowing actual discourse and the ability to have diverse opinions, and we're being funneled down. But we need to listen to people, and I'm a really good listener. That's what I do for a living. So I am out of my realm of experience standing here with everybody in the limelight with bright hot lights shining on me. But having worked with marginalized communities, I am definitely a strong advocate. I'm an includer. I always make the group bigger. You know, my friends and I, we were talking about, actually I have a friend who who's from Lebanon, and he was talking about his experience coming to Canada and his marginalization, as well as somebody recently from Syria, and that they don't feel like they are included. They need actual help to be able to learn some of the Canadian values and things like that. I know when I grew up, we had programs such as the Welcome Wagon, where we had people that actually brought new people into the community and worked with them. We also had a program at one point in time that was government funded, I believe, and it was called Wraparound, where we brought lots of different people from different communities to bring them together. I know I have some great ideas, and I believe I can really do that, because that's what hits home for me.
Thank you very much. And Waji, if you'd like to take the question next.
Thank you kindly. So the question is, why should the BIPOC members vote for me over these other candidates? And how would I address specific needs and interests if elected as a member of parliament? Growing up, my father was an immigrant to Canada under the Pearson immigration system, came as an engineer in 1965 with $50 in his pocket, and worked hard to get his engineering degree for the second time at the University of Ottawa, raises kids with values to be good, strong members of the community, be good Canadians, and take care of our brothers. And ultimately, whenever I'd go to school, I always found it interesting. People would always say, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, from Scarborough." And people then say, "No, but where are you from?" I said, "Well, I was born in North York by Jane and Finch." But where's your father from? Well, my father's from Toronto too. But where's your father originally from? He said, "Oh, my father was born in India." "Oh, you must be Indian." I said, "I guess." And for the longest time, I basically grew up with the hyphenated label. One of my favorite professors from medical school, Dr. Hudson, always used to get mad at medical students and say that you shouldn't call a patient a smoker. He'd say, "Dr. Hudson, we've got this patient who's a diabetic," and he'd get really mad. He'd say, "That man's not a diabetic. That man's someone who suffers from diabetes. He's a human being. Don't label people." And we're very quick to try to label people when in reality, we're all just Canadians. So I grew up as a Pakistani Canadian for much of my life, till I had an opportunity to finally go to visit Pakistan about 8 years ago. And I was hanging out with a couple of my cousins. We were having some tea in the middle of the night, and one of my cousin's friends came over and said, "Oh, who's this guy?" He said, "Oh, he's our cousin." And the first thing the guy asked me was, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I guess I'm from Pakistan." The guy looked at me and said, "No, you're not. You're a foreigner," right? So, okay, so you're not really seen as being Canadian in Canada. You're not quite seen as being Pakistani in Pakistan. Where are you from? What's the label? So what we have to do is we need to stop labeling people, because it's not about labels. It's about being Canadian and cherishing and celebrating all of the things that make us Canadian. I believe every single one of you out there has a unique story to tell. And as your member of parliament, I want to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gary?
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's a great question, one that I've asked myself a lot over the last 3 or 4 weeks, as we all are on this. And I'm really proud to, I will be really proud to serve for Kingston and the Islands as an MP. And similar to Mark's heritage, I have a very similar heritage. My parents came across the ocean in 1952. And being born in 1960, I was part of a Dutch Canadian family. And I share that because it really is relevant. And you know, I know that it's quite different today, but I remember hearing, you know, Dutchies go home and, you know, stop taking our jobs. And I didn't understand it, but very early on, I didn't understand it at all. But as a child, you know, I kind of rebelled against that, and it had great conversations in our home. And I still very thankful for that time. I think that has changed me and has given me, in the Dutch tradition, almost of a sense of responsibility for our fellow man. And it's been part of my life, part of my parents' life, and part of my family's life right now. And so it's just transformed me as I work professionally. I really enjoyed representing businesses. And now as a city councillor, I take representation really seriously. And so for me to be part of this, and I remember when Jimmy invited me to the first Canadian Colors event. It was just a great night for us. I remember the folklore I was sharing with Shelley, the folklore weekends that we basically raised our family on. I really wish that we could get that going again, because you have a piece of every culture and language in you, and the food. So I know what's in me. I know what's in me to share, and I know that it's something that I will live to do for Kingston and the Islands, and give it all I have, and to celebrate our diversity.
Thank you very much, Gary. And Vic, the question goes over to you.
Thank you for that question. Living in Northern Ontario, I understand multi-generation and intergeneration trauma and the marginalization in the form of poverty, insecurity, housing insecurity, homelessness, barriers to education, employment, healthcare, especially mental health care, dental health care, medicine, and cultural support. These are things that we need to fix, and the NDP has a plan to fix these. Indigenous and Black people, people of color, have all borne the brunt of this pandemic. I will work with Parliament to ensure a delivered, guaranteed livable income, which will create a floor for everyone, dramatically reducing poverty and homelessness. The guaranteed livable income is a major recommendation in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report. A promise that we need to keep, a promise I don't think the Liberals will keep. I and the NDP will develop a dental plan and a pharmacare program for all. We will develop educational grants and loans that are interest-free. We will create grants and loans aimed at encouraging women and BIPOC members to start their own business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mark, the question to you.
Thank you very much. I would start by saying that over the last number of years that I've been the Member of Parliament for Kingston, over the last 6 years, and indeed before that, when I was Mayor of Kingston and a City Councillor, I've always tried my best to represent not just all of our community, but in particular marginalized parts of our community, whether that be various different cultural backgrounds, whether that be the LGBTQ community. I've always tried my best to be there to listen, to properly represent all the views of all people throughout our community. And that's brought me to a place where I've had the opportunity to meet with so many different people and to form a perspective that I believe is holistic of our community. From a federal level, some of the things that we have initiated, we've created a number of different initiatives and programs throughout the years to help and support marginalized members of Canada. The one that comes to mind more specifically as it relates to this question is the Black Entrepreneurship Program that was introduced a couple of years ago. And this was a program that was specifically targeted towards helping people of color establish the resources in order to pursue entrepreneurial dreams and spirits that they have. Some of the other stuff that we've done, hosting a national summit on very important topics like Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. But we also, in 2019, specifically, the federal government created a new ministry of the executive branch of our government, and that was the Ministry of Diversion and Inclusion. This was a ministry specifically established to ensure that diversity and inclusion was at the forefront of every decision that a government made, that a representative would sit at the cabinet table from this ministry to make sure that when decisions were being made at the cabinet table, they took that into account. So I believe that my experience over the last number of years has given me the opportunity to represent people from throughout our community. And if reelected, I will certainly continue along that line and make sure that everybody's voice is heard.
Thank you. And with that, we have our final curated question.
The K-12 school curriculum in Canada's provinces and territories pay very little attention to Black and Indigenous experiences beyond brief mentions of Black and Indigenous Canadians among several other ethnic groups in Canada's history. What would your candidacy do to help make Canada's school curriculum more inclusive, especially with regard to race and history? In other words, what would you do to decolonize the Canadian school curriculum in an effort to fight racism in schools?
So for this question, we're going to start with Waji.
Thank you very much. So growing up and having gone to school, one of my favorite classes to take was history, and I took all of them. I took the mandatory grade 10 history. I took in grade 11, I took 20th century world history, and then an OAC, which we still had OAC back then. That's you guys see the gray hairs, and that's how old I am. I took modern Western civilization. And much of this was motivation for me to go and join the regular forces of the Canadian Armed Forces and serve my country as a dental officer in Halifax, Nova Scotia for many years. But one of the things I found quite unique about entering Halifax was everyone asked me about the Halifax explosion, and I looked at everybody and I said, what's the Halifax explosion? And the Halifax explosion was a very large event that took place in Halifax. It was the largest explosion in the world, believe it or not, before Hiroshima and Nagasaki had the atomic bombs dropped on them. Yet we never learned about this in Canadian history. So there's a lot of things in Canadian history that need to be taught to Canadians that are relevant. And when it comes to minority issues, marginalized groups issues, I don't think we should be just focusing on Black History Month or Indigenous History Month. I think what we need to do is work hard to incorporate the history of people from marginalized communities who've made significant contributions to the development of Canada as a country. So if it's the case that we don't currently have an emphasis, what we need to do is we need to ask people, go out there and ask, what do you think is relevant for us to teach in the Canadian curriculum? We have to come to a realization also that the federal government doesn't really develop provincial educational plans. However, we can have a strong leadership role to influence provincial governments to incorporate these topics into the curriculum, and that is what you call a leadership plan.
Thank you. And next, Gary.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was an excellent answer because that pretty well, I think that we have to recognize it is a provincial jurisdiction, but I think what we're talking about, as Waji said, it is about leadership. And I thought about this answer. I don't have anything written on that one. So I will say that that's what I really believe in, and that I wanted to mostly come across here today with is I believe in that kind of engagement. And that's really what it's going to take to bring our curriculum into a modern day understanding of where we are at as a society, in a Canadian society. We know that there's lots of changes coming, and we had that conversation last week on council. And so it's within that framework that I have learned so much of where we need to go with this discussion. And so it needs to be all inclusive. I think that we can accomplish that. I've learned that in the sessions that I've had and the training and the experiences. And so I'm going to trust that we're on that road. And certainly as the MP for Kingston and the Islands, I'm going to even champion that road. I want to be on that road, and I have a lot of doors to knock on if I'm honored with that privilege, but I intend to be a voice and to be active in that and show the leadership that is required. And I would appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Vic, the
you.
question to you.
Thank you for the question. Indigenous and Black people have been robbed of their culture, their way of life, their language, art, music, literature. So revamping the school curriculum with leadership and through the province will allow us to rectify these injustices. That means that Indigenous people and Black people as well, the teachings must be reflected in all of these things. It can't be just about history. We need to teach it in literature, arts, music, even math and science. From the Indigenous and Black perspective. All curriculums must be culturally sensitive. I helped start the Northern Medical School and the midwifery program in Northern Ontario. We trained physicians and midwives to work with elders and medicine men and women as equals. Also, 25% of medical students in Northern Ontario, in the Northern Ontario School of Medicine are Indigenous. We need to create similar programs for teachers. We also need to train teachers to be aware of their own personal biases. Grading practices are not consistent from one student to another, or worse, learning disabilities are attributed to one's skin color and their ability to speak English. And these can go undiagnosed. What we need to do also is to develop tests and evaluations that are culturally appropriate and substantive. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. And Mark, this question to you.
I've heard the last three people speak talk about the provincial responsibilities, but I think it's disingenuous to suggest that this process is going to be led by the province. The Truth and Reconciliation report is about the truth and reconciliation as it relates to the federally run schools and what happened. There is a large role here for the federal government to play, specifically in establishing, rebuilding, or building new and refurbishing schools that can be given to Indigenous communities to administer, to run in the way that they see fit based on the curriculums that they establish. The federal government has a significant role to play here. I realize that the question asked about Black and Indigenous, and I realize that yes, in a lot of the public school and private school systems in Canada, or in Canada, it's run by the provincial governments. And yes, there will be work there and leadership for the federal government to do. But let's not forget, about the 94 calls to action, specifically as a result of the schools that the federal government ran. These are the schools this is the system that we need to fix, and it is a system that we need to put in the hands of Indigenous communities so that they can run them and that they can utilize the resources to properly promote the curriculum that they see fit.
Thank you. And Shelley, to you.
Hi. In regards to the educational system, I guess I have a little bit of a bird's eye view, having worked in it at one point in time over 17 years ago, for about 8 years working with children. This always sort of stands out to me. I apologize, my printer is running out of ink, but these are two little kids. And in this particular situation, it was on the internet. The white boy asks for the same haircut as Black friend to confuse his preschool teacher. And I think that always sits close to me, is because this is inclusion. Little kids don't discriminate. It's a learned behavior. And when it comes to a system, we have an educational system as well as many other systems in Canada that are really archaic and could definitely use some freshening up and an overhaul or upgrading, as we can say. Employing people of different ethnicities in school boards is absolutely amazing. And that's a good start. I know with my child growing up, she's a pretty well diverse child, and we spent a lot of money on different books. And these books I learned as an adult a lot through, and some of them are just You know, the Underground Railroad to Canada, We Fought Back, Teens Resist the Holocaust, Nelson Mandela, Hiding Edith. You know, I am a girl, I can change the world. And there's a lot of great curriculum that can be added, but it's not there. And there are really good things that we can do to change that. But again, it all starts not just with a school system, because again, children are born very open and non-discriminatory, but then it's about how do we create the conditions to help families and adults reinforce what we are teaching our children, right? Because we learn discrimination, we learn judgment, and we really need to focus on whatever conditions are needed to help us all be inclusive so that we can feel belonging as well.
Thank you very much. So thank you. That concludes the first section of curated questions from CCKF. We will now switch over to our questions submitted by local community groups. This time we'll be limiting the answers to 1 minute, starting with Shelley.
Hi, I'm Debbie Fitzerman, president of the Kingston Jewish Council, or we call it KJC, which is the Jewish community, both those affiliated and non-affiliated in the Kingston area. This is an interesting time for us because we're in the midst of our high holidays or days of awe. So it's a very contemplative time. However, as a community, we are concerned with the rise in anti-Semitism. So here is our question to you. An effective but flawed tool in combating online hate speech, Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act was removed in 2013. This left a gap in the effort to protect Canadians from hate speech that could be addressed in several ways. What do you see as an effective strategy to reestablishing an improved provision in the Human Rights Act to combat hate speech that would replace that flawed previous Section 13? And how do you see yourself as a local MP influencing the PMO to get this on the docket and on its way to becoming law?
Shelley, we'd like to start with you, please.
Thank you so much for that question. It hits close to home for me. I may not be of any sort of particular ethnicity, but I too have experienced hate directed towards me just through this political campaign my whole life. I've never experienced that because I'm always a very kind, genuine person. But in the last 2 weeks, I have had a lot of hate come towards me. And I know as a psychotherapist that I know where some of these root causes of hate comes from. And I know we're talking about a leadership, finding a leadership that will lead with authenticity and can lead by example, I think is really important. And so, sorry, running out of time. So I come from a bottom-up approach. Let's go for root causes and help people create the conditions necessary so that we can love one another, so that we can see diversity, respect it, and honor it for who we are as being different from each other.
Thank you very much, Shelley. And Waji.
I think as a country, as a nation, we have tried over the years, over the past 50 years, starting with 1960 and the Diefenbaker Conservative government having the Bill of Rights, to Pierre Trudeau bringing in the Canadian Human Rights Act to be incorporated into Constitution Act 1982. And then, of course, the flawed Section 13 that you refer to. In my opinion, we need to focus more on prevention and using these opportunities as an educational tool. The whole purpose of incarceration, at least as it refers to corrections, is to be punitive, restitution, retribution, but also to have rehabilitation. If you arrest and charge someone with a hate crime, we may in fact only be hardening their resolve and their hate for a specific community. We have to look at great leaders of this world. And by great leaders, I mean Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Gandhi was a spiritual leader during the partition and breakup of colonial India back in the 1940s. And what he basically said was he took people who were either Muslim, Sikh, and Hindu, and he said, as opposed to hating that person, learn more about that person. What we need to do is take these individuals and perhaps use these opportunities where they have acted out as an educational opportunity and a rehabilitation opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Gary?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a great question. I will admit, I don't know a lot about this section of the Human Rights Code. I didn't get the question until very late, but I thank you, Fawaji, for giving me a quick history lesson about that. And I'm committed to understanding it more, to being aware and bringing forward lots of dialogue on this. I think that, as I've stated earlier, Canada's Conservatives will follow the consultation process, and that's what it's going to take in order to do the job really well. We will review the legislation with interest to ensure that free speech, the rights of Canadians, which we have heard is ultimately very, very important. We need to get it right, but it doesn't mean to be sitting there waiting to be addressed. So I will show the leadership required for Kingston and the Islands, but also when I get to Ottawa, and to make that difference and bring positive change to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And Vic.
Yeah, a philosopher once said, I have the freedom to move my fist in the other than in the extremity of your chin. And what that means is that I have the freedom to say things, but when it becomes hateful, I don't have the freedom to do that. My only concern with legislating freedom of speech and hate crimes is not hate crimes, but freedom of speech, is this slippery slope. So one of the things is I can say something that is very hateful and there is repercussions. But what is stopping from that slippery slope to say, I might say something as an NDP that another government doesn't respond to. And what they can do, if we do have that slippery slope, is they can then say, you know what, we don't like what you're saying. By the way, that is a hate crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. And Mark, you're next.
To me, there's a clear line between free speech and a hate crime. Quite frankly, the reason why we're seeing the rise of hate crime right now is because there's a massive amount of misinformation that is fueling anger that is out there. As a matter of fact, a 2020 study from the Strategic Dialogue Global conducted found that 6,600 Canadian pages, channels, groups, and accounts on several different platforms were specifically spreading information about white supremacist, misogynistic, and other extreme views. I respect very much Vic and Gary. I really like them as people, but this is not about free speech. There is a clear line between expressing your own views and promoting hate. The Minister of Justice introduced legislation in the spring, Bill C-36, which was specifically to take steps to protect Canadians from hate speech and crimes.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are on to our next question.
Hello, my name is Jagdeep Singh Walia. I am the president of Kingston Sikh Cultural Association, and I am in that capacity here representing Sikh community. I've been asked to ask two questions, and my first question is that there is a growing population of Sikh community in Kingston, and it is kind of a sudden change. As an MP, how do you envision a smoother integration of such a change for Sikhs and maybe a similar visible minority, especially in labor force, public force, and overall in our society here? And my second question is, Sikhs are a very small population, and I have heard cases of discrimination. What steps will you take to mitigate events like hate crimes and other discrimination events? Thank you.
And for this question, we will be starting with Waji.
Thank you kindly. So with respect to having more Sikh people immigrate to Kingston, I think that's wonderful. One of the things that I like to welcome, or I like to think about, is some of the nicest Canadians I've ever met. And those are folks who I've met out in Newfoundland. And I remember being in St. John's, Newfoundland, having just landed off a plane for, I believe, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I met this lady who asked where I was from. And I just told her visiting Newfoundland for the first time from Halifax. And she asked me what I'm doing for dinner. And I said, well, I'm not really quite sure. We just got here. And she said, well, we got a couple extra seats at the dinner table if you and your friend want to come join us. And I just looked at this lady. I was like, you don't even know us. Like, we could be like, we could be like mean people or something. And she said, well, if you were mean people, you would have said that. And I love the hospitality that Newfoundlanders have. And I think if we could just, like the Dalai Lama said, have a little bit more compassion, this world would be a much better place. And so with respect to the Sikh community, I invite you, come, meet with me, meet with other members of the Kingston community, and invite us to your events. We would love to learn more about the things that make you culturally significant.
Thank you very much. And to Gary, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate that question and coming to that understanding really of what we can do as a community, because it ultimately for me comes down to community. Kingston is an incredible community that is we have so many communities within our whole community, and we can do so much together. There are many ways that certainly within the Conservative platform to promote businesses and to give you guys a start in your community. I think it's there for you. I think like Waji said, it is about getting to know each other and taking the mystery away. I would just encourage conversation, and Canadian Colors is a perfect example of what we should be doing. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gary. And question next to Vic, please.
Excellent. Thank you for that question, Jagmeet. Jagdeep. So Kingston has welcomed many refugees before, and immigrants as well. And it is a very welcoming place. But we have to ensure that there is infrastructure to support immigrants. And the NDP, for example, will have a social housing policy, will have a housing policy, in fact, to ensure that people who immigrate to Kingston have a roof over their heads. A guaranteed livable income, for example, it might be that is something that a new immigrant might need just to get a foot in the workforce. The other thing that we will do is to ensure that there is proper pharmacare, dental care, and mental health care to support these people as well.
Thank you very much, Vic. And Mark, this question to you, please.
I recognize that the question asks, what will I do? And not necessarily what is my party proposing. So I'll focus my answer on that. I think that what I can do is continue to meet newcomers to Kingston, to welcome them here, to participate in various different cultural events that they have, so that all newcomers, not just members of our Sikh community, but indeed all newcomers know that they're welcome in our community, and that our community is a community that, like Gary said earlier, used to have a folklore where you would go from pavilion to pavilion to learn about the cultural diversity that exists right here in Kingston. I need to continue to develop and to foster and to promote those ideas. I think that that's ultimately what leads to the tolerant country that we have, the country that makes people respect and accept the vast diversity that we have. So as an individual, I will continue to push to make people that come to our community of all cultural backgrounds welcome here so that they could thrive.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Shelley, this question to you, please.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't have the last few questions, so these are catching me off guard a little bit. However, in speaking with Gary earlier, folklore is really important. And that was a way to celebrate diversity for sure, but it was a way to have fun. And when we have fun, we can move from the stressed out brain to the fun and creative brain, and we see things different and we like each other more. And we're not ready for attack because we're not in that stressed out brain, which life seems to keep us in. But some of the expressions from people is that we need to be patient, and we need to encourage people and give directions for those who are coming into Canada. And that was from somebody who just came into Canada as part of a group 3 or 4 years ago. So how do we ensure smooth transition into society? I believe was the question. Basically bringing people together in face-to-face interactions. I think digital technology has gotten out of control, and people just tend to spew all sorts of things out on it without realizing that there's a human being behind that, and we can be more human to humans by being together face to face.
Thank you very much, Shelley.
So
And
Vicky, just clarification, please. These are questions, random questions, right? We did not get these beforehand.
you
You
should
didn't
have
get them,
received
yeah.
them. But we do have, so if you need the questions, I have a copy of them here that I can provide for you.
It's a
Um,
bit too late.
But with that, we'll move on to our next question.
So we, just to be clear.
Hi,
not
good
your
afternoon,
show.
everyone, and wish you all the best for
Not the
the
second
coming
slide.
elections.
Just the first.
I'm Charan Krishnaswamy, representing India-Canada Association of Kingston. So we have a question for you. How can we ensure that the situation in the countries of immigrants and the varied opinions in the media around those situations do not negatively impact the lives of those immigrants here in Canada? Thank you.
Sure. So the question was, how can we ensure that the situations in countries of immigrants, political or otherwise, and the varied opinions in the media around those situations do not negatively impact the lives of those immigrants here in Canada? So for this question, we're starting with Gary.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't know how to answer that question. I think it really begins with community for me. In our community, when we speak truth and we bring light to situations, we can change our world. And yes, we have a media that constantly wants to twist situations to be negative. But I think that we know better. And I mean, I wrote things down that matter to me about restorative conversations, about spending time together, be the change you want to see in your world. And I think that when we see and when we overwatch television, sometimes we can get a very negative view of things. But I think that as a community here, we can be the change that we want to see in our world. And we have that responsibility. And that's something that I believe in and live for.
Thank you, Gary. And next, we're going to Vic.
Yeah, and I apologize. I did not get that email.
No,
so-
I'm sorry.
No,
from
that's
my end.
okay. That's okay. From what I understand is that the media has, actually, it's not, what the media does is to perpetuate what our culture is, what our biases are. And what we have to do is to work with the media to ensure that those biases are not harmful to us. And I'll just give you one example in terms of my leader. One of the things is I've heard many a times, if he takes off his turban, we will vote for him. This is not this is not Canada. Comments like that should never be part of the lexicon of Canada. And what we need to do is to ensure that people through the media are well educated in terms of being acceptance and loving, which I know because I am an immigrant that came to Canada and was accepted in that way.
Thank you, Vic. And this question now over to Mark, please.
Thanks. And I do want to say that I think that the audience should know that there appears to have been a bit of an error here. Vic and Shelley don't have these questions. We were provided them on the left, they would say that Rebel News is not the media. On the alt-right, they would say that CBC is not the media. And I guess what's important is that we foster an attitude and a world or an environment in which people don't question when something is identified as the media, they're not questioning the source. And not questioning the source in a way that suggests that they are intentionally slanted one way or the other. And because I think that it creates a very hostile, toxic environment when people start going on about that. I've tried to answer that off script because I don't think that it's fair the way that this is unfolding right now. So I'll pass it along.
Thank you very much, Mark. Shelley?
I need to address it. I'm sure the email came. I was not excluded, but there were lots of emails and I'm sure it was there. I've probably just missed it, is what's happened. So I don't hold anybody responsible. It's probably my own issue. Anyway, thanks very much. I kind of forget the question, but I wrote a few notes here that, people are talking about media. Gary mentioned, be the change you wish to see in the world. It's on my necklace that I've been wearing for 22 years, which is, I want to be the change. And that's why I'm running for member of parliament. But how we get our source of information, my experience is it depends on who the media is. Yes, absolutely. And anything that's really important, I think the government should be able to have a regulation in what is presented and how it's presented, because I know I was on the media on Tuesday and I was apparently having a protest and it was spun. I was there for support of some people, but it was spun that I was actually planning a protest. And the hate that came to me from that as a person, like, that's horrible. And yet this person was able to spin it according to their perspective. And so I agree, anything that's really important, and if it has to do with people, it should be between people and it should be expressed in a way that people don't get to slant and manipulate or massage the message.
Thank you, Shelley. Waji, to you, please.
Being so close to the date, it's very difficult to not remember September 11, 2001 and how that changed the narrative for many Canadians. Sikhs were targeted as a result of them wearing turbans. Muslims were targeted and labeled as being terrorists. Jewish people were labeled by conspiracy theorists. It took one group, one day to divide our nation and our people in such a tremendous way. And what we need to remember is that Canada has always been a country that's represented peace, that's been respected internationally. We wear that Canadian flag with pride as we travel internationally. We need to focus more on the positive things. We're talking about Sikhs in the Kingston community. One of the things that the Sikh community does, which I didn't talk about, and forgive me for answering it in here, is they have langar, which is the provision and making a vegetarian meal for poor people who come to the Gurdwara. And for the Sikh community, the next time you guys are doing some langar, give me a call. I'd love to be on your chef's line and serve some food. But we need to focus on the positive things that we as Canadians from abroad do and not try to allow evil forces to modify what people think about us. And if people really view us for who we really are, they will see us for what we really are.
Thank you very much. And with that, we move into our next question.
Hi, my name is Edwin Mack. I graduated from McGill University in 1963. I went down to the state. I'm coming back to Kingston in 1975 and worked at Queen's until I retired. I'm now the president of the Chinese Association, and the Chinese community is growing very well in the last, actually many of them are coming to Kingston in the last few years. And here are some of my questions I want to ask you. Any plan to help immigrants to start businesses and to contribute to the economy in Kingston? Non-white immigrants tend to go to big cities. Any plan to encourage them to go to second or third tier cities so that they can help the economy there? And the third question is, are there any initiative to encourage minority foreign students who graduated from Canadian universities to stay in Canada and help Canada grow?
All right, so Vic, this first question is for you.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent question. I'm not quite sure I can answer all three in the 1 minute that I do have. But one of the things that we, the NDP, will make sure is that they are grants who are geared towards minorities in order to start businesses. So these are also special grants in terms of ensuring that women have the opportunity to also be entrepreneurs. One of the questions that you ask is about ensuring that they are PhDs that we train in Canada that are allowed to stay here in Canada. And I know that my department, which is public health science, have a lot of public health professors that are trained at Queen's that came from other countries. And we welcome them with open arms because we know that they have a lot to offer, not only Kingston, but Canada in general.
Thank you very much, Vic. Right, and next to Mark, please.
Thank you for that question. And I think the timing of the question is extremely germane, given the fact that we are going to be looking for growth in Canada as we move out of this pandemic. The amount of debt that Canada has taken on as a result of the pandemic means that we need to grow in order to properly be able to pay that down. One of the strategies is definitely going to be through welcoming and encouraging people into Canada and indeed into Kingston to start new businesses, to contribute to our economy, to put resources into our economic activity here in Canada. And the federal government, at least the current federal government, is certainly, the Liberal Party is certainly interested in employing any possible resources that we have to make sure that that can be a reality, because growth right now is going to come from not all within our country, but indeed a lot of it is going to be coming from those who can contribute by coming and establishing in Canada.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Shelley, to you, please.
So because I don't have the question, I'm going from memory, and I don't really remember the three-part question, but I did hear and remember something about.
So it's for immigrants to start and expand businesses and keeping students in Canada after they've studied here.
Okay, so I guess my really quickly would be, you know, we had all sorts of people with all sorts of businesses and opportunities, and we had to shut them down, and lots of people lost many of their businesses. So I think we should have some sort of a plan to help, I guess the word is restart, not rebuild, because I think a lot of the infrastructure is already there, but definitely there should be some government support to help fix what the government sort of had to do at the time that a lot of people lost their businesses, and encouraging people to stay. I know some of the people that I receive services from, they actually do sort of like a, they allow them to come work for their industry while they're learning languages and things like that. So they can actually provide support, which I think is beautiful. It's quite a family affair and a cultural affair, and it's wonderful. So maybe there are other opportunities where we can use that in other areas.
Perfect, thank you. And this question to Waji, please.
To the Asian community, I find it disheartening that our national broadcaster basically portrays the archetypical view of a Korean family by having a comedy called Kim's Convenience to perpetuate stereotypes that aren't necessarily true. To take your hard work, your perseverance, and basically reduce it to a sitcom, which is a comedy, is unacceptable. It's actions like these that make people not feel as though they are Canadian or a part of our national fabric. So how do we get people to stay in Kingston? Well, why would someone want to stay somewhere where they don't feel welcome? We need to have the welcome wagon, the welcome mat out, and basically with open arms and an honest, sincere way, say, you guys are fellow Canadians and we want to work with you. And as your member of parliament, we're going to make sure that we make programs from a financing, business structuring, business advice, Chamber of Commerce, Kingston Economic Development Corporation work with you in order to make you successful.
Thank you. And Gary, this question to you, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very good question, and I am full of confidence, and I think there's a lot of positive news for us when the Conservative Party of Canada platform completely is prepared for this kind of question. And our platform is full of incentives. Our economic development platform is aligned with this. Our Main Streets program, there's going to be considerable grants and funding provided for new starts, and even in small towns that we're going to have that has already received considerably positive reviews. My time in Kingston Economic Development has shown me that it is a real priority for this city, for example, to be able to keep our graduates here and in its innovation sector, and it's happening already. So we're seeing a lot of potential, and we're seeing it actually happening now. So the time is now for this, and I feel very positive about the concerns that you have, that within our community here and within our country, we have it in ready for you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we move on to our next question. My name
is Peter Hodgson. My traditional name is Man Who Walks to the End of the Earth, and my spirit name is Napi. I carry them with great humility. I'm Anishinaabe, and particularly Ojibwe, and live here in Kingston and the Islands. Our question today comes from Cindy Blackstock, inspired by her questions for candidates tweets that she's been sharing with people across the country. So our question is, what public good is served by the government currently and past spending over $100 million in public funds to fight against First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in court, including residential school survivors and First Nation kids? And what will you do to end these legal cases?
And this first question goes to Mark, please.
Thank you very much for that question. And the question has been hinted at a number of times by Waji, and I'm happy to address that. The issue is not that the federal government is trying to take kids to court because they don't want to pay children what they're entitled to as determined by the Human Rights Tribunal. What the issue is it's a deliberative process within the court to determine what a fair amount is based on various different factors. So for example, if a child had been in school for 1 week or a child had been in school for their entire elementary school and high school experience, are they all entitled to the exact same amount of money of the $40,000 which was established? And so what the federal government wants to wrap their head around is how should the money that's been allocated properly be distributed? That's what the issue is about. Despite a lot of the rhetoric that's out there, that is what is trying to be determined. The federal government has said the entire time that they intend to pay, they want to pay. It's just a matter of how much goes to each individual participant in the school.
All right, Shelley, this question to you, please.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I don't really know much about the situation, and I didn't have the time to sort of look into that. I think the biggest thing for me would be to sit down and collaborate with the people that have this information, such as this gentleman there, and hearing more about it so that I can make a better and informed decision and how I can be useful. I apologize for that.
Thank you. Waji, to you, please.
This wasn't a question that I had, but I think I've answered. I got to hold back tears here because I can't believe I'm listening to my colleagues sitting there trying to justify how much money should be distributed. I had a friend who unfairly went to jail for 1 day, but knowing what happens in jail, the psychological trauma for this individual was heartbreaking. And for us to be sitting here as old, rich white dudes trying to decide what crimes were committed, not even making an effort for a thorough investigation to charge people, to take them to court and hold them responsible for being pedophiles and rapists is absolutely unacceptable. We have 68% of boil water advisories. 1 in 3 people in Indigenous lands is still expected to drink something like this in a first world nation. I'm looking, 1 in 6 children are affected by food insecurity. 30% of those are from the Black and the other 30% are from the Indigenous communities. I wasn't aware that in our country, there's a threshold to which we accept kids being allowed to go to sleep at night with an empty belly.
Thank you. Gary, this question to you, please.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know a lot about this particular topic, but I'm absolutely pleased by the Conservative Party platform in managing through the Truth and Reconciliation. The Conservative Party supports treaty rights and the process of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous people. And the Conservative government also created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of the 2007 Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, which recognized that the Indian residential school system had a profoundly lasting and damaging impact on the Indigenous culture, heritage, and language. The Liberals are cherry picking the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission instead of doing the hard work of tackling issues that will improve the lives of Indigenous people across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Vic, this question to you, please.
So I do know a lot about this because I have many Indigenous friends. I've been working in Northern Ontario, living in Northern Ontario. And one of the things working with Indigenous people is building trust. If you don't have the trust, you will not be able to work with those communities. how is it, and it isn't hundreds of millions, it's actually billions of dollars, that the federal government is using your taxpaying money to sue through legal systems Indigenous peoples? So the reason I think that the federal government has only done 80% of what needs to be done, which is the symbolic things that need to be done, the reason they can't do the extra 20% is because they don't have the trust. How can you have the trust of somebody that you're suing? You can't.
Thank you. And with that, we go to our next question.
Hello, I am Judith Brown, and I am speaking on behalf of two organizations here in Kingston, the Afro-Carib Community Foundation of Kingston and KACC, Kingston African Caribbean Collective. Some of the work done through these organizations include a Black History Month celebration and the funding of scholarships, both at Queen's University and St. Lawrence College. At Queen's University, there are the Robert Sutherland and the Alfie Pierce scholarships. One of those at St. Lawrence College is the Calvin Bensfield Scholarship. These scholarships are mainly financed through an annual dinner dance held by the Afro-Carib organization in mid-November. The City of Kingston also partly funds the Black History Month celebration through its Heritage Fund. And now I would like to pose our question. Irrespective of what your political party's views, policies, and manifestos are on EDII, equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization, if you were to give one positive and one negative recent development in the EDII space in Canada, from a personal opinion, what would these two examples be? Thanks.
And for this question, we would like to start with Shelley.
Thank you. I'm hoping I'm going to answer this properly based on what I just took for notes for the question. So the equity, diversity, and inclusion, my understanding is that Kingston has created a manager position on that. And it's focusing on systems and policies, if I'm not correct. Hoping I'm correct. Anyway, from a systems perspective, being in systems, I really feel that the systems are like a top-down approach to everything. And again, I feel that there are bottoms-up ways that we can do things. The fact that there's this dance that raises money to help create these scholarships, I think is absolutely brilliant. And that maybe we could do more of those for lots of other communities as well. But I think from, our systems and our policies can help dismantle some of the systemic racism and oppression. But I think, again, working bottoms up is a really good approach because, again, when we like each other, we can see each other for the diverse people that we are and hear each other's opinions and views because we are actually interacting with each other on a relationship base.
Thank you. And this question to Waji, please.
Thank you very much. I think the fact that Vic, Shelley, and I are standing before you today is a testament as two visible minorities and a female running to be member of parliament in Kingston and the Islands, when not too long ago, this room would have been full of 5 white men. I think that's a testament to the advances that have been made from the EDII perspective. However, as a business student, we were always told about the law of unforeseen consequences. And in the Bible, we say, do not punish the son for the crimes of the father. Paulo Freire, who used to speak about radical education, used to say that in the pedagogy of the oppressed, when the oppressed becomes the oppressor. And is it fair to young white men to be excluded from a job opportunity simply because they are white and they are male? This sort of reverse discrimination is also not fair. And as a member of parliament, I believe that we need to highlight these things and we need to work more towards being inclusive and together and focus on being Canadians, because that's what we want to be seen as. We want to all be Canadians.
Thank you very much. And the next question, or sorry, this question to Gary, please.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I agree that there's I'm a person, I'm a businessman in town, and I'm a politician locally. And I guess the positive for me is that, as Shelley mentioned, the city has been working. This city hit punches so far above its weight in so many programs, and our equity and diversity and inclusion advisory council has begun. And that is an opportunity for us to be involved and to hear what can happen in our diverse community. And I am committed to that. I've had that as an example as a businessman. Certainly as a counselor, I've learned that. And I would work toward fostering a diverse and inclusive environment in Kingston and in my role as a member of parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Vic, this question for you, please.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned Robert Sutherland, because I actually wrote CBC asking to develop a documentary on that individual. Not too many people know that he was the one that financially saved Queens, yet in order to name a building after him, it only happened about maybe 15 years ago after students rioted. To say that it is a good thing that we have dances to have scholarships, I think that is a bit that's not good. I think we need stable funding, and we need it from the government. One of the good things, Mark, you said something about Black entrepreneurial grants. Is that correct? Just say yes or no.
They're not grants, it's a strategy.
It's a strategy. Okay, even if it's a strategy, that is actually a good thing. I don't disagree with all the things that the Liberals do. Just most of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to Mark, please.
Thank you very much, Judith. You asked for a positive and a negative. I'd say that the positive is that now, as a result of the EDII, there are many more workplaces and organizations that are including the training and resources and making space for these important conversations to happen at the grassroots level. And I think that that's incredibly important. And one example of that is what's the new position at the City of Kingston that Shelley mentioned, which was the manager that's going to oversee the initiative at the City of Kingston human resources level. But then the other thing that you asked is a negative. And I think that the negative is the fact that it's just still widely unknown. There aren't enough people talking about it. The fact that this exists is just something that's not out there enough. I don't think enough people understand it. And I think that a lot more work needs to be done to properly communicate and get the message out there.
Thank you. So we are a little bit close for time, but we will finish up with our last community question.
Hello, my name is Aisha Alperzadi, and I represent the, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay, take your time.
Take your time,
Okay.
Aisha.
Slow down a bit.
Slow down, okay, I'm talking. Sounds good, okay,
Otherwise, it was great.
okay,
Anytime.
thank you. Hello, my name is Aisha Alperzadi, and I represent the Islamic community of Kingston. And my question for you is, with recent discriminatory incidents done against Muslims here in Kingston, what tangible steps would each leader take to address this?
For this, we'd like to start with Waji, please.
So being a Muslim and a member of the Muslim community, I can truly appreciate the question that you're asking. As I'd mentioned, after the events of 9/11, being in the Canadian Forces, and basically being, if you said you were a Muslim, people would say, well, are you a terrorist? And these sorts of comments really hurt. I recall a physician friend of mine, she was a cardiologist at the Halifax Hospital, and a patient basically refused to be seen by her because he was afraid that as a Muslim, she was going to kill him. This is the type of I'm not going to say the word ignorance, but just misunderstanding that was taking place, which was rather hurtful. So as a federal government, what we need to do is partner with the Muslim community to increase awareness projects that Muslims are actually good people. Actually, I'm going to go one step further and say people of all religions are good people. Christians, Jews, Muslims, even agnostic people are good people, right? No religion out there says go and harm someone and cause someone hurt. No religion. And Islam is a peaceful religion, and we need to help people understand that.
Thank you, Waji. And this question to Gary, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think we all hang our heads with sadness when we see discrimination. And I'm proud of this group that we have here because I think there's a real commonality that we share and a belief that this has to stop. And I think that this is a perfect example of how you come together and share ideas. And I just believe in education. I think that we need to know more and understand more. I believe in engagement. I think that actually, I believe the Islamic Temple here does a fantastic job of engaging the community, and I feel very comfortable with them. And we're all together in this. And the other thing is, I really believe that as communities, there's so much in the community. I know this is a federal forum here, and we need to incentivize and encourage, but it is also as a community, and I want to be involved with that as your MP, and to be there and to be part of it and be part of the partnership that we all need to have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And this question over to Vic, please.
Excellent question, and thank you for that. So one of the things that I study is what they call interactions. And basically, when you have two variables together, the resulting effect is not additive, it's multiplicative. And there's something called intersectionality. So when, for example, you are a woman of Muslim faith who might be a lesbian, those are the things that I also worried about, even more so, because they are the most vulnerable in our society. And what we need, and I have a friend who actually fits that very description. And what she worries about is that things do happen to her, but she doesn't have the confidence that if she goes to the law enforcement or through the criminal courts, that she's going to be supportive. And what I want to do is to make sure that we have infrastructures in place that will support all women. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. All right, this question to Mark, please.
So at the local level, I had the opportunity to meet with members of our Muslim community a number of months ago to receive their feedback and their important concerns regarding some of the events that had taken place, not just nationally, but indeed in our community. And it gave me an opportunity personally to learn about it, but more importantly, to write to our minister and indicate what I had learned from members of my community. More at the national level, in July, the federal government held a national summit on Islamophobia specifically. And at this summit, the attendees were invited to identify ways that the government could work with Muslim communities throughout Canada so that we can properly develop a strategy and an approach that is done and built in collaboration with those people in particular that have been affected.
Thank you. And finally, over to Shelley.
Hi. Again, going from the question, I think this is how the question's to be answered, so I apologize if I misunderstood it. So I guess we're talking about how do we create tolerance for others who are different from us, if that's correct. We find what makes us similar and we focus on our strengths. We come together in person and face to face so that we can actually feel the experience on a deeper and personal level. And only then, when we experience each other on a personal level, instead of behind screens, do we realize how wonderful we all really are on that level.
Perfect. And thank you very much. And with that, that concludes all of our community questions. So thank you very much. With the timing that we have left, we will not be opening the floor to audience questions today. But as we come to the end of our All Candidates Town Hall, I would like to introduce Zerman Khan, board member of the Canadian Colors Kingston Foundation, to say a few words.
Thank you, Victoria. Just making sure that this mic is on. I think so. Before we get started on the final remarks, just to the issue that was raised earlier, our apologies to Vic and to Shelley on the confusion around the questions that were not received. We did take a double check to that. So the initial questions that were sent, there was 4, and then there was a follow-up email on Friday that had the Word document with the questions in there. The community questions initially were not to be shared in the interest of shaving off time for the event today is why they were shared. But again, our apologies to you. Our first event as such, and we will endeavor to be much better as we move forward and over communicate so that we don't have a situation as such. But thank you all very much. And thank you once again to everyone for joining and engaging with us today. Canadian Colors of Kingston Foundation's mission is to bring different cultures, mindsets, and backgrounds together to foster understanding and communication and embrace change to create a diverse and inclusive community. We hope this event provided an opportunity for everyone to learn more about some of the issues our local and national culture-based communities face. And hopefully we can work together to identify ways that the federal government and our local member of parliament can ensure that BIPOC and other underrepresented communities are heard and supported over the next 4 years. We would like to especially thank our guests, Grandmother Kate Brandt and Mr. Mohammed Sani, our community candidates, Mark Gerritsen, Gary Oosterhoff, Vic Sahai, Dr. Waji Khan, and Shelley Sale Udall, and our distinguished community leaders for taking part in today's discussion. Canadian Colors Kingston Foundation would also like to thank your TV, BVK Solutions, and the Canadian Colors Board of Directors for organizing and hosting this event. We encourage everyone to participate in this year's federal election however they can. Be sure to register to vote if you are eligible. Vote by mail or in advance polls, or vote at your assigned polling station next Monday, September 20th. If you haven't already, be sure to look at each of the political parties and candidates' campaign platforms available for the public online. We hope that we can continue to grow and build a strong relationship and dialogue with all of our local candidates and communities, regardless of the results of this election period. To learn more about Canadian Colors Kingston Foundation, the candidates for Kingston and the Islands, and their platforms, or to join us for future events, please visit us at canadiancolors.org. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us this afternoon. Have a wonderful weekend, and remember to vote. Thank you so much.